Those of us who make some or all of our own clothes might feel like we've opted out of the fashion industry. However, as citizens of this planet and feminists, we can't ignore the problems caused by clothing and fabric production. And, in fact, us home sewers might be well placed to have a huge positive impact. Because, as Sophia Yang, the founder of the world's leading youth-led ethical fashion NGO, Threading Change, discusses with guest host Kat Camfield, we know that clothes aren't just commodities. They are creations that contain stories. And that concept is potentially powerful enough to disrupt the perception that clothing is disposable. So stick around a few minutes to hear more. Welcome to Check Your Thread, the podcast that will help you sew more sustainably. My name's Zoe and I'm obsessed with sewing. I've been blogging about it for over 18 years and I'm the creator and host of the popular Handmade Wardrobe Challenge, Me Made May, which is just starting to wrap up this year. But, like many people, I've become increasingly concerned about the climate and ecological crises, and I'm looking at the way that my lifestyle contributes to them. So in this podcast, I'll be nerding out about making clothes whilst exploring how to minimise the negative impact that it may have. I really hope you'll join me in this journey. Hello, lovely. Thank you for clicking on this episode. Are you doing okay? And have you had any sustainability wins lately? I'm not sure that I can point to any. I guess aside from selling a couple of garments on Vinted, and I guess that means that those things are getting into the hands of people that want them and will extend their life. So I guess that counts. But here's a sustainability win that was sent to me by a lovely listener named Kate. Kate writes, I'm sharing a story inspired by your recent work on that fencing bag, which is a mend I did recently at the Brighton Repair Cafe. Anyway, Kate says, many years ago, I was a fencer and a young coach, and I was about to fly across the country to Coaches College with my very, very worn wheelie bag. I had to fit a lot of stuff in, and my weapons had recently torn through both sides of the bag, and I was worried that my weapons would slip through the holes en route, and boy, I was not enjoying anticipating the hijinks that would bring about. Nothing to be done but darn my fencing bag. Easy peasy. I did a nice tidy job that holds to this day. But I did not think things through. My bag, gargantuan, well-travelled and heavier than I wanted to put on my rickety furniture, was on the floor. So instead of turning the work at the end of the row, I turned myself. Hundreds of little lines of stitches, which meant hundreds of squats. I got to Coaches College and was so sore that I could barely move, and really enjoyed the flabbergasted looks from my peers when I told them that it was from some very hardcore darning. Kate also added in their reply, and if you want a practical tip for folks mending bags that really take a beating, I used dental floss for the darns. Worked a treat. Easy to find in a grocery store or pharmacy, strong, and if you buy the waxed version, you even get a bit of water resistance, at least until it wears off. Thank you so much for that, Kate. So there's some lessons in here for all of us probably. Be careful when extreme mending. And I want to say a huge thanks to Anya for signing up to support the podcast via Patreon this week. Much appreciated. There's always ebbs and flows with the patronage for this podcast, so I really do appreciate those who choose to step up and help make it viable for me to continue making it and sharing the stories and ideas that I think are so important. If you feel you wouldn't miss the cost of a cup of coffee each month, or more or less, please head to patreon.com/checkyourthread to sign up. It takes less than 2 minutes. And we just had a lovely sew together session for patrons via Zoom at the weekend, where the attendees were doing a whole range of crafty activities. One person was mending a much loved hoodie belonging to their son, and another was finishing off a much needed woven t-shirt that they needed to wear to work now that the weather has got super hot. Anyway, there's another Sew Together session scheduled for the week after next, and I just scheduled not one but 2 in real life patron meetups that are taking place in Scotland this summer. Woohoo! I cannot bloody wait for those. Anyway, let's get cracking with this latest gem from legendary guest host Kat Camfield. Once again, Kat came to me with another awesome idea for an episode for the podcast that took me a nanosecond to sign off on. This conversation is so freaking good, and Sophia is so incredibly articulate and inspirational. And it really gives me hope for the future that there are young people who are so incredibly well informed and passionate, pushing the conversation around the sustainability of fashion forward. So huge thanks to both Kat and Sophia for their time. Do check out the Threading Change website or their Instagram because there are a ton of ways that you can support their work. So there won't be an episode next week because this week is the half-term holidays, so I'm child wrangling more than usual. So until 2 weeks' time, take care of yourself, take care of your loved ones, and those who need and deserve our support. Take care if planning an extreme mend, but do please tell me about it and enjoy.
Thank you so much for joining me today for this interview. I'm really glad that you could take the time to meet with me.
Of course. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to digging into this conversation.
Awesome. So in true Check Your Thread style, could we start by having you tell us who you are, where you are, and what fills your days?
Yeah, definitely. So hi everyone to everyone who's listening. My name is Sophia Yang. My Chinese name is Yang Ya-cheng. I use she, her pronouns. And I'm the founder and executive director of Threading Change. We are the world's leading youth-led ethical fashion NGO, which we'll get more into in the interview. And I'm currently based in London, England, which is quite exciting. I lived in Vancouver for 12 years. I went to UBC. So yeah, taking some of the fashion knowledge across the pond as well. And what fills my days is a mixture, really. It's everything from, emails to meeting with prospective partners, whether it be philanthropist organizations, other fashion brands, fashion NGOs doing similar work, youth NGOs in this space that are also doing really exciting work on sustainability and climate justice. I also spend a lot of my time working with municipalities because of a couple projects we have going on around textile waste diversion. So that's really exciting as well.
I'm going to ask you some more about that because I have some questions for you.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, and I've been running Threading Change now for over 5 years. So I also work as a senior consultant at an NGO called Canopy. So I live, work, and breathe ethical fashion all day, every day.
Do you get time to stop and breathe and have your own life for yourself as well?
Yes. Now I'm in the summertime, yes, I try to, take some time off, but I feel like April's always really, really busy because it's Earth Month. It's always so hectic. And September as well, because it's Climate Week and it's also Fashion Week, right? And it's also back to school, secondhand September. And then June usually is also quite busy because that's when we do a lot of our Fair Fashion Festival events. That's when London Climate Week is. But it's kind of spread out. It's April, June, September is a nice cadence. So yeah.
That's interesting that your business has that kind of seasonality because I think about that often in terms of retail. Mm-hmm. Maybe this, because that's maybe more my background, but that your business also has these touch points throughout the year that are a focal point for your work. So before we dive into talking more about Threading Change, I am very curious to find out how you ended up where you are 5 years in, 6 years in.
Yep.
How did you get interested in fashion and the environment? And then also, how did you get politicized around fashion?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I get this question a lot. So I feel like I haven't always had a passion for fashion, as they would say it. I definitely think, in 2013, when I moved out of my parents' house to go to my first year at UBC, I was kind of buying a lot more of my own clothes. But even before then, I will admit, I was a huge fast fashion consumer. I remember in high school buying a lot of Forever 21, discovering H&M was within my budget when I was 17 and buying a lot of H&M, a lot of Zara, because it was just affordable to me at the time, right? So I think I got into styling in that way. But I say this because I really don't believe in shaming consumers when it comes to fashion. So that's how I'm kind of prefacing with this. And I study natural resources conservation in the Faculty of Forestry at UBC. So I tell people it's my background. A lot of them are huh? What's the, what's the intersection between fashion and forest? But there's actually a lot, which I will get into. So I would say kind of my foray into the fashion world came about more deeply when in 2018 I moved into this in this house in Vancouver after I was away for a year working for the Canadian government in Edmonton. So I went back to Vancouver, and one of my roommates in this house, he basically secondhand thrifted or vintage shopped all his clothes. And because we were the two roommates in the house, I was quite close friends because we became close friends. Sometimes when he would go to vintage markets or he would go thrifting, he would invite me to come along. And I realized that, not only because vintage isn't always necessarily more affordable, but thrift a lot of time is. So when I was thrifting more, I realized that not only was the clothes more affordable than if you go to the mall and buy like, H&M and Forever 21, it was also more unique. Like, it's not common you have the same thing as someone else when you are thrifting the items. And I kind of did this experiment, that summer and fall where, I will walk down Commercial Drive in East Van wearing different outfit combinations. And every time I would be wearing like a thrifted vintage outfit, I would almost always get compliments, also because people on Commercial Drive are so nice and friendly. But when I would be walking down with an outfit from like, a fast fashion brand or something you can get in the mall, no one ever stopped me to be like, I love your jacket or I love your shoes. But I found so many unique things. So I basically just kind of thrift and vintage shopped everything. And it was actually quite easy to do. So then when I went to my second ever UN climate conference, which was COP25 in Madrid, because I went the year before it when it was in Poland. And I was with like a superstar delegation of amazing youth delegates. And I felt like everyone kind of topic in fashion they were like really focused on. There were people focused on nature-based solutions, cities, renewable energy. And I was kind of in my head like, what is my thing in climate? I'm interested in every topic. I didn't know what was like my most like forte. I want to find my lime in a sea of lemons. So when I went to my second UN conference, I realized that like I developed a really big interest in fashion through like thrifting and vintage, hunting over the last year. So I was like, okay, well, I'm at the biggest climate conference in the world. Surely there must be so many fashion events, right? Because like fashion and climate are related. I did a Control F search of fashion events at COP25, and this was in late 2019. Guess how many fashion events there were?
No idea.
I know it's kind of hard to guess. There was one. Out of thousands of side events. Yeah, there was one. Yeah, and I was like, thinking to myself, okay, well, maybe, there's just like, maybe just not that many events in general that's, on this topic. Let me see how many events are on adaptation. Over 500. So I was like, okay, this is clearly like not a very spoken about topic. I just gonna go see what it is. So I went to the event, and it was the 1-year anniversary signing of the United Nations Sustainable Fashion Charter. And while it was interesting, I definitely walked out of the event feeling like very, very disappointed and just like dismayed with the state of fashion. And I think a lot of youth climate activists will have had this experience at some point in their life that really prompted them to enter the world of organizing, of activism, or just really, doing impact-driven change-making. Whether that's like you get really bad eco anxiety, or a professor or an author says something that sparks something in you. For me, it was this event. And it kind of boils down to three main things. The first one was I really felt like they were just talking about fashion through a lens of mitigation. So companies talking about emissions reduction in fashion. We've made all these great targets to reduce all these emissions, and we've reached some of these goals. But obviously, they were only talking about scope 1 and 2, right? Scope 3 emissions was not really being addressed. And we know that scope 3 emissions many times is really what the bulk of the emissions is, right? It's like the entire amount of emissions in the production chain as well. That's where it's very energy and resource intensive when you're making clothing. And then the other part of that was that it was really focused on the environmental dimensions of the industry, which is very important, but it's not robots that make our clothes, right? It's people, it's humans, and a lot of it are also women of color. I really, really felt like, the human dimensions, the labor component was not really being discussed. That was the first thing. The second thing was that they used the word next generation multiple times. And when I look at the stage, no one on that stage was under the age 40, when a lot of people that are buying clothing are youth and Gen Z. Mm-hmm. And so if we're a large demographic of consumers of fashion, why are we not being represented in boardrooms, in the grand stage, in these spaces where we are a big portion of the customer base, right? So I felt like it was almost using the next generation as a way to say like, young people care about fashion sustainability, so we got to do more, but there was not any young person there represented to actually further this cause.
That's crazy.
Yeah, which I think is pretty crazy. And then the third thing is I really felt like it was very, very global north centered, which, the conversation still very much is, right? Like the brands up there were all brands from Europe or North America. And also the end of life wasn't really being discussed either. It's like, okay, you're greening your supply chain to produce the clothing. What about the fact that, there's a dump truck of clothing being sent to a landfill every second, right? Every second of every day. What about all the textile waste in the world already? And that's going to be coming. So it's in the duration of this podcast. Let's see, how long have you been talking? Maybe like 10 minutes times 60. That's 600 dump trucks of clothing already dumped. What about all that textile waste wasn't addressed? So I left the event feeling just like really confused and disappointed and just quite shocked, frankly, that like at the biggest climate conference in the world, there was this was occurring. And I went to a couple of meetings after, and I realized that there were different working groups, right? There was young people working, there was a renewable energy working group, the cities working group, the biodiversity working group. And I just asked, I was like, is there like a fashion working group? Is there a circular economy working group? And they were like, no. I was like, oh, why is that? And they said, well, no one ever started it, or no one ever said it was a topic they were interested in. Everybody wants to talk about biodiversity and adaptation, but that's why we have this group. And I was like, interesting. Surely there must be more than just me at this conference of over 15,000 people that are interested on sustainable fashion.
Well, especially because we all wear clothing. Like,
exactly.
It's so, what's the word? Immediate? It's like fashion is something, or fashion or garments is something we engage with on the daily, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
And it affects everyone. Like, literally everyone needs to get clothes, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Definitely. So, so I was like, so I feel like the wheels are kind of turning my head a little bit. Like, this is a topic we need to be talking about. And then I went back to Canada after that, and I had in the back of my mind, I had to do something about this topic. And then COVID happened, where my job at the time was to plan in-person social innovation labs with an organization. And now that COVID happened, everything went on Zoom. So my work hours got reduced because I was spending a lot of my work hours before doing things like booking venues, getting catering, doing all these in-person convenings. And now that's all on Zoom. So I was like, okay. So with the extra time, I was like, maybe I should develop more about this idea. I'm someone that's really big fan of collaboration, not competition or duplication. So I did a lot of research about, other organizations working on fashion. Was there a youth-led org working in fashion? And I was surprised to find out that there actually wasn't any organization in the world that's fully youth-serving, youth-led, working on fashion. And from some of the people I met at, within COP, I knew at least a couple people were interested in circular economy and fashion in some way. So when I had that extra time, I just kind of dove headfirst to launching Spreading Change. And 5.5 years later,
amazing.
Here we are. Yeah.
That is so amazing. Like, for you to have gone from this one moment at the conference, and you so clearly identified like the lack of youth representation and nobody focusing on this topic, and you're just like, I'm just going to launch into it. It's pretty amazing.
Thank you.
Here we are. So you're like, what, 5-6 years in?
Yeah, I know.
So now, what's going on with Threading Change these days? I think your activities are focused around 3 different themes, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can you give us an overview of what the themes are, and then maybe a few of the activities connected to those?
Yeah, totally. So we have something that we call the tri-impact model, which we definitely think you kind of need all 3 of these things working in tandem to really achieve the impact that you want in the fashion industry. We call it the 3 shins. Sometimes like 4 shins. It's education, innovation, legislation, and also consultation. So within education, this one I feel like is like pretty self-explanatory. We really do believe that education is the root of everything, and especially in ethical fashion. And I mean that because there's so many people that are not aware of what their clothes are made up of, right? Like, a lot of people don't know the fact that a lot of our clothes are actually made from trees. And this is where my forestry degree kind of comes in handy with the work I do at Canopy, is that there is a type of fiber, it's the more so broadly known as MMCFs, or man-made cellulosic fiber. And it's tricky because in the name, it says man-made, so you think it's a synthetic fiber. But man-made cellulosic fibers actually are from trees. So within that group, there's viscose, there's rayon, there's lyocell, and modal. And a lot of brands like using it because it's kind of like a cheaper alternative to silk. very nice
Yeah,
feeling.
flowy, soft.
Exactly.
Yeah, sewists, we see that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of like undergarments or like bed sheets or like sleeper will have like viscose, right? A lot of people don't know that viscose comes from trees. Also, some
Yeah.
people don't know that polyester is a microplastic and is a synthetic fiber. And they don't teach you these things in school, right? Like just like how they don't teach you how to do your taxes, which they really should. So it's like if they don't teach you these things in school and you're not like a fashion enthusiast, like I can totally understand if you don't know some of these things, right?
Yeah.
So I think education in that sense is very, very important. But I think the other thing about this is very critical is that it's very, very, very imperative that we don't shame consumers. And I see a lot of people, whether it's organizations or individuals, shaming consumers. And the reason why I have a bone to pick with this is because I really do believe that when you shame people and you put them in a corner and you ostracize them, it doesn't necessarily always drive the impact you want. It drives shame, it drives resentment, and it can actually make them not want to believe in your cause.
Yeah, it can get people's backs up, right?
Yeah, it can. And I also think like a lot of the thing about fast fashion is that the whole premise that it's like cheap, right? And if you're a new immigrant or like you're a single mom or you're a broke student, you can't afford to spend $200 on that t-shirt that's like completely ethically made. And that's okay. Like I'm not going to sit here and shame you for buying a certain brand if you can't afford, sometimes a more sustainable option. And I think this is really like the chicken and the egg in the fashion industry is that right now, the more sustainable option many times is the more expensive one. And we shouldn't be shaming consumers because we are currently in an affordability crisis. So this is why I say education is a huge part of what we do, because it's not about shaming the consumer for making quote unquote the wrong choice. It's more so demonstrating to them and showcasing them the different suite of choices you have available. So things like swapping, mending, repairing, vintage hunting.
Right.
Like these are all other options, right? That you can participate in that really promote secondhand fashion that doesn't involve you to break the bank, that actually promotes more social cohesion through community events and helps you like meet more like-minded people. So that's why events and like education are directly intertwined. And it's a huge, huge, huge part of what we do.
And so, Sophia, I know like Threading Change is youth-led.
Yeah.
So when you talk about the education and stuff, are you directing that at youth? And is it youth in the global north? So who is the education to?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's really to everyone. Everyone that comes to our events, everyone that engages in our materials. But I would say because we're a youth-led, youth-serving organization, we do typically get more of the under 35 demographic at our events. We also do a lot of like in-school workshops and programming, and we've taught students as young as like grade 3s, right? So we also get the under 18 sometimes, and also kids come with their parents because we've done like family-friendly clothing swaps or like all ages ones.
Cool.
But yeah, I think the education component is also for anyone who just might be new to ethical fashion and want more information on it, or they just want a community where they can feel, welcomed and included and accessible. And you may have noticed that I'm choosing a lot to say ethical fashion instead of sustainable fashion. And the reason for that is because sustainable fashion is very much on like the environmental dimensions, but ethical addresses the social and the environmental. So yeah.
So we're including workers' rights and the conditions of the workers who are producing the fashion, especially in the global south, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the organization being youth-led, you've got all these events, but they're not restricted to youth. It's just that the organization is youth-led and it tends to attract younger people.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And then I think you had a really good question about like what are some examples of events that we do. So I would say within education, our flagship series, which we're pretty known for, we call it FFF, which stands for the Fair Fashion Festival.
Let's hear more about that. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's an alliteration, first of all, so we love that. The 3 Fs, and our mission is the 6 Fs, which is a feminist, fossil fuel-free fashion future. So yeah, a lot of Fs, but it just rolls off the tongue. Because we give a F about ethical fashion. It's a joke that we make.
Yeah, nice one.
Yeah, cheesy, I know. But within FFF, oh gosh, I think I'm so proud of it because we've done FFF now 2 times in Vancouver, 2 times in Toronto, 1 time in Halifax, 1 time in Montreal, 1 time in Victoria, 1 time in Nairobi, Kenya, and 1 time in Bangalore, India. And we're doing our first FFF
Wow.
in Europe this year during London Climate Action Week in London in June.
Congratulations.
Thank
That's
you.
so fantastic. It's become international. Like, that's amazing.
It has, yeah. And, it's very important to us because fashion is inherently an international issue, right? Like the supply chain is international, is global, and there's a lot of people involved within the industry as well. And what it is think of it as like an elevated clothing swap event where you get to find the best thrift swap and sustainable pieces. You get to learn from, community leaders and people working in sustainability, climate justice, and fashion. You get to make new friends, and you also get to learn new skills. So it's kind of like the mecca of all those things. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so can I slow you down just one sec? So part of it is clothing swap, garment exchange.
Yeah.
Getting some new garments, which is always fun.
Yes.
But you're also teaching skills.
Yes, yeah. So some of the skills that we have, that we also always have a mending workshop. So teaching people how to mend,
Yeah.
how to repair. We bring in local level menders to help lead some of those. We do a really exciting initiative. We call it the community quilt. And what that basically is, like, it's kind of like, let's all make a quilt together. It's like, let's all weave our stories together. And how this works is we have 4 questions. And usually they're things like, what does ethical fashion mean to you? Why is sustainability in fashion important? What are you doing in your daily life to practice ethical fashion? And how can we get more people involved? And we usually get fabric scrap donations from fabric suppliers or local stores or brands. Shout out to Kindor Textiles. They've given us a lot of fabric scraps over the years, which is much appreciated.
Hey, they're Canadian based. We like them. Yeah,
Yes,
awesome.
we love them. They're based in Delta. They're great. So yeah, so we have these questions, and then we get people, all ages, anyone can participate, to write with a Sharpie on the fabric patch an answer to those questions. And then we teach them sewing skills to just sew the patches together. And it makes a big quilt.
That's amazing. Oh my gosh. Are there photos of these quilts that we could see somewhere?
Yes. I was going to say, I'm happy to send you some pictures and you can add it to the show notes later. I can try to pull it up now.
Oh, love that. Yeah. If you could send some to Zoe, because we're all sewists, right, here at the podcast. So it'd be amazing to see the quilt.
Nice.
Yeah, I'd love to see that.
Yeah, because with us, like, because we've gone global, right? We've always done this. We've also done this activity in other activations. Like, we did it last December in Nairobi when it was the UN Environment Program's General Assembly. And we were asking, like, the executive director of UNEP, like, global policymakers, government ministers, and they loved it. And we were able to display this quilt later on as well when we we were in Paris last month for Change Now, which is a conference. So that was incredible. Let's see if I can maybe show you. So that's the quilt right there on what it looks like.
Oh, amazing. Colorful, vibrant.
Yes.
Lots and lots of little pieces connected. What does it say at the top, Sophia?
Woven to last.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And this is us. This was displayed at Paris, so this was amazing. So yeah.
Oh, it's so nice. It's something tangible that you can see. Oh my gosh, yeah. It's kind of got this like modern quilt vibe going on.
Yeah, definitely. So this was a really great initiative from FFF. And then the other part that we're very excited about is called the Museum of Changemakers. So what that is we get social impact organizations from that city, typically 10 to 20, to come. And they're all boothing, talking about their initiatives to all of the festival goers. So examples of past people include like Ocean Wise, Dressed for Success, CPAWS, Emily Carr, like universities. And what I really liked is last year we actually got Elections Canada to come, not because they were talking necessarily about their role in a circular economy, but also because they were telling people to go vote. Because we think...
Oh, that's so great.
We think civic engagement is very, very important, right? So we also use it as a platform to talk about other issues. That's what I mean. Like, you don't have to be into fashion to come to FFF. It's really for everybody. And I think what's great about fashion is that it can be used as a vehicle of change to talk about other topics, right? Like, we've had situations where, you can use fashion to talk about water, where you can use it to talk about like forest protection or clean air, because there is a relation to that because we all wear clothes, but because it's so integral to our lives. And then we always have panels where we have, designers, policymakers, people that work in the industry, NGO representatives. And the last couple of FFFs we've done have all been funded by municipal governments because they kind of see it as a way to add it to their waste diversion, initiatives, or a way to get more people aware of how to reduce their textile waste in their local communities. Because at the municipal level, it's a very, very large role they play when it comes to textile waste collection and diversion, right? So, yeah, it's been a great festival so far. We're very excited for the one in London. It's going to be probably our biggest one yet. So, yeah.
Oh, we should see if we can get Zoe to go down and check it out or participate because she could teach some mending skills. It's okay, nice. Zoe, I'm not volunteering you. But that would be amazing, and report back to the podcast about it. She's in Brighton.
Okay, nice. Oh, amazing. Yeah, very close.
Yeah. Cool. Backing up just a little bit, I would love to hear more about the 6 Fs. So my understanding is what Threading Change's mission and what you're aiming for is a feminist, fossil fuel-free fashion future. Mm-hmm. So I feel like some of that is kind of self-explanatory, and I can guess maybe why feminist, but could you talk a bit more about why feminist is in there?
Yeah, for sure. It's not just because it's an F. Okay, it's a good question. I think it really boils down to like that initial spark I had when I was at that 1 year anniversary event in Madrid at the UN Climate Conference, where it was so apparent to me that the focus was on environmental dimensions of fashion and not on the human. And I think that's just not fair, right? Because it's humans that make the clothing. And it's also women, the majority of the time, that make the clothing. I think the statistic is changing from year to year, but the year I started Threading Change, I think it was 87% of garment workers globally were women. But in certain countries like Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, it's like 91, 92%. The number can go up even higher. So it's the large majority of women are makes for clothing. And it's also Black, Indigenous, people of color, women, right, in the global South.
Yeah.
And I don't always like to use the word global South, so I think it's more so just like, in non-Western countries, they're the ones making the clothing. And a lot of the times they were not getting paid, a living wage. They were not getting paid adequately for their work because of COVID. There was tons of canceled orders, like billions worth of dollars of canceled orders. And they already made the garment. They already did the work, but they're not being paid. Because the brand is like, sorry, COVID happened. This didn't sell. You don't get paid, which is not fair because they already made the clothing, right?
That's crazy. And you can't tell me that those companies, even with COVID, you can't tell me those companies probably were still making huge profits, or they had the previous year. Like, could they not have had a contingency fund for environmental emergencies or whatever, right?
Yeah. And I think the other thing about why we said the feminist piece is because a lot of different types of violence is oftentimes very intersectional. So whether that's like domestic violence, workplace violence, gender violence, or sexual violence. And women are subjected to a lot of this within the textile industry. Also because a ton of the workers comes from generations and generations of garment makers and workers. Especially in countries like Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, where, there's centuries of women, right, that have been working in the garment industry. So it gets passed down more and more. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that level of abuse or violence continues on within these different factories that people don't even know about. I think one of the largest examples of, the biggest, not the largest, but pretty much the biggest like fashion disaster that we all know of is the Rana Plaza collapse in 2013, right? Where they killed over 1,000 people in Bangladesh after many workers reported that there were cracks in the ceiling, there were cracks in the walls, this wasn't a safe work environment, and, the workplace completely ignored them, and sure enough, that factory collapsed. And most of the deaths in that were women with children, with families, with loved ones. And I think this is what we mean when we mean the feminist part, is that not only are women the mass majority of people that produce the clothing, they're also the mass majority of people that clean up the clothing. And what I mean by that is some of the largest secondhand resale markets in the world, you may have heard of this, is Katamanto Market in Accra, Ghana. And there's also the Dandora Market / dump site just a little bit, 20 kilometers outside Nairobi. And it's a lot of women textile waste pickers and people that have bales on their heads when they're transporting textile waste from one region to another. And it's oftentimes still the women that bear the burden of these responsibilities. So a feminist fossil fuel-free fashion future is important because we need to make sure that we're not forgetting the exact people that are making our clothing, but also the roles that they have and they play and why it's imperative that they need to be fairly compensated. And I think the one other thing that reason why we put this on is because if you look at the director, CEO, executive level positions of some of the largest fashion brands in the world, only 5% of it is really women or women identifying CEOs. Even a lot of the consumers of these brands are primarily women. So women are supporters, they're consultants, they're managers, but they're not very often executives, right? When they do the most of the work in a lot of these places. And a lot of that is because of the glass ceiling. But if the fashion industry is deemed girly, which is, I really, really hate this stereotype when people are like, oh, fashion's like a really girly industry. It's really feminine. It's really, really feminine. Like, I'm not interested in fashion because it's too girly for me. If it's really that girly of an industry, why is it that most of the people that are making most of the money are men? Right? Like, is it really that girly? Right? Like, I think fashion has a branding problem. I think it's almost branded as feminine or branded as girly as a way to treat it as like trivial and not important.
Right.
But in reality, it's an industry that's clothing all of us, right? And it's an industry that's inherent within everything. If you look at all the UN Sustainable Development Goals, they all adhere to fashion in some way or form. It's not girly, it's a necessity. And also a necessity is fair labor and human rights. And right now, women are not being treated fairly in the workplace in fashion. So we need to change that. So that's why the feminist in the 6Fs.
So I'm guessing that people in Western global North countries are the vast majority of consumers, right, of the fashion that's being produced.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So how much do you think sexism and racism on the part of those people is keeping these practices going, these like harmful, like violent practices going for garment workers? Does that make sense?
It makes sense, yeah. It makes sense, and it's a good question because I think the answer is nuanced. I think so. One of the reasons why I think the fashion industry is the way it is today is because it's so incredibly complex. And the supply chain is very, very complex. And we're right now in a time of both political and economic turmoil where the fashion industry is affected a lot, whether it's rising production costs, tariffs, the oil energy crisis, making shipping garments and all the different materials going to be more expensive. But I think beyond that, it's also the fact that a lot of people view fashion as a crutch or as retail therapy. They view buying clothes and getting new clothes, especially ones you can buy online, like not thrifting, new clothes you can buy online, as a way to give them temporary fulfillment or happiness. And I've been there, right? Like we get upset about something didn't work out for us. We want to go and check out, shop, buy something new. Holidays, Christmas presents, Valentine presents, like fashion is so interwoven into like gifting as well. And I think that's where it's a little bit dangerous because when you think about buying clothes, a lot of times it's like, do you really need it? Or is it because it's like a celebration or you're sad, right? And I think like in the westernized world, fashion many times is not really like a necessity, and when it's a want, not a need. You want to be able to show off. You want to be able to buy the coolest thing, the newest thing. That's why trends and micro trends happen. And what's difficult about that now is that because of TikTok, social media, the trends are so fast that it's become micro trends. And trend cycles that used to be 4 seasons a year now is like something like literally 52 seasons. There's new stuff coming out every single week. And it's really a matter of keeping up with the Joneses. Like, if you are an influencer, if you're someone working within the fashion space or social media, you want to keep up with that. You probably don't have malicious intent to, further contribute to the system, the degradation of garment workers' rights, or contribute to more textile waste, but you're inadvertently participating in it because you have a desire to fit in, right? To feel something from that retail therapy. And I think that's where it's a little bit nuanced or fuzzy because at the same time, a lot of of young people want to fit in, right? And the way they do that is through clothing.
Yeah.
If they can't afford to buy the more expensive Reformation, they might go for the Shein. And who am I to tell them you're bad for buying that? Like, shame on you when they make minimum wage. So I say it's nuanced because I think, again, going back to the education piece, this is where helping people understand the root of clothing, where clothing comes from, how it interwoves with culture, and the effects of the fashion industry. But beyond that is like the other options, the other solutions, the other way they can also feel very, happy from getting clothing. It doesn't have to be completely new. It can be a thrifted one or a swapped one. But I think a lot of the fact is like the global north, like people in the Western world, even if they don't have an ill will or ill intent, it's very invisibilized what happens on the other side, right? Like the initial production stage, most clothes are not produced in Canada. They're mostly produced in India, in Bangladesh, in Vietnam, and China. People don't know what those supply chains factories look like. And on the other side, the textile waste is going to Philippines, Ghana, going to even parts of Pakistan, going to Kenya. You don't know what the end of the life looks like. So then why does it matter to you? So I think this invisibilization of the various stages of fashion is what makes it difficult to care more. But I tell everyone, once you dig deeper into the fashion industry, the more you realize how little you know, because the supply chain is so complicated, right? So something that we've done is we've actually done Dandora dump site tours with African youth around the Nairobi area, where we take them to a dump site outside Nairobi and show them the waste. And it's just mountains and mountains and piles of waste. Like, it's just insane how much waste there is. I can send this after the show notes as well. But just to kind of like give you an idea, like, this is just an example of how much waste there is. Like, just mountains of it.
Wow. Yeah. So we're looking at like basically what you would imagine a garbage dump, but it's like enormous. There's like cranes on the top, and it's just that's all garments, right, Sophia?
All garments. Yeah.
It's like garments as far as the eye could possibly see. It's kind of gray and just mountains of this stuff, right?
Yeah. Look all the water it's polluting.
I was going to say the second picture. So all that water is draining out of there, right?
Yeah.
And then ending up in the water supply.
Yeah.
You know what this makes me think of? Like this conversation about how removed the supply chain is. Mm-hmm. And then the end of cycle. It just makes me think back, and I'm not trying to idealize this, but way back, pre-industrial revolution, like so it used to be, right, way back, people were growing the fibers in their community, processing them in their community. Somebody was growing that, harvesting it, processing it, weaving it, creating garments, and those people were it was maybe you doing it, but also you'd know and see what went into the garment. The garment was completely biodegradable because that's all that was in the garment. All you could do is, produce local fibers. Yeah. And then garments were used and reused and passed down. And it like literally went from like maybe a garment to like a baby's item to a baby's diaper to like a rag to whatever, right? So then it was so immediate. It was in our communities. It was totally local. We could see where the garments were coming from and the amount of labor that went into them. And now it's like so removed. It's a bit like, I guess I feel like it's a bit like food production, right? It used to all happen in our communities. We were the ones growing it, processing it, eating it, and knew all the labor. But now it's like, we don't know necessarily who the farmers are. We don't know the people who are harvesting the trees for our cellulose-based fibers. It's all so removed. So, yeah, I think it's like the education piece must be huge because people they're like, oh, I just go into this store in the mall that's been, it's been advertised to me that this is the place where I get my clothes. But you look at that one garment and it's like, what happened to make this one T-shirt? Like, who's involved? What resources were used? Yeah. We're so removed from it now.
Yeah, it's true. It's interesting to say that because I think two industries where there's a lot of interconnectedness is food and fashion. It's so true. Like, So I think a lot of people who are rejecting the globalization and post-industrialization and the modernization of, right, a lot of people going back to like woofing, farming, growing their own food, trying to make their own clothes. Some people are like, oh, they're so hippie doing that, but it's good to kind of go back to the basics and go back to the roots, because it's interesting to me when people are like, like I'm vegan, or I'm gluten-free, or like whatever diet they're on, and they're very, very careful about, the certain food they put into their bodies. So it's like, then why don't you feel that same way about fashion, right? Because clothing is on your skin, and your skin is your biggest organ, it's our biggest organ, and your skin is absolutely absorbing toxic chemicals, whether there's PFAS, it's polyester, and there's been a lot of studies out there done on how, they're really interesting read, I can also add this to the show notes, on how the modern sportswear and athletic wear industry has really convinced us that synthetic fibers, Gore-Tex, nylon, and polyester are the best workout performance wear clothing, when in fact it's all petrochemical clothing, and a lot of vintage activewear that's mostly cotton is actually totally fine, right? So a lot of fashion is also marketing. Like, how you can tell a brand is actually sustainable is when you look at their marketing budget and the sustainability budget. And if their marketing budget is like 5 to 10 times more than a sustainability budget, something is wrong. Yeah.
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 Yeah. It's like, we gotta whitewash or whatever it is. We've got to like pitch this.
Yeah.
In a way to hide kind of what the origins are and what the impact is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I'm curious. I was like doing a little bit of background research before we met up, and I heard you say something that grabbed me, I guess, as a sewist. But you said something about how people these days see garments as commodities rather than as items that embody stories. So I'm really curious if you could talk. I don't know. This seems like a bit of a heart issue for me in some way. So
Yeah.
I'm curious, what do you think is lost when people see a garment as a commodity as opposed to seeing the story that's embodied in it? And what do you wish people would think about when they were looking at a garment?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I came up with this quote because I really do believe that human emotion and feeling really touched by something is essentially how you get people to care about something, right? Like how I study environmental science at UBC is because when I was growing up, my grandparents came to Canada when my mom was pregnant with my sister, and my dad took us to every single national park in Alberta that summer. So in 2 months, I went camping basically 8 weekends in a row, right? Jasper, Banff, Yoho, Waterton, you name it. How do you not fall in love with nature after that, right?
Yeah.
The story, the emotion, the memories that something invokes makes you fond of it, but also makes you care about it more. And because I'm an immigrant to Canada as well, and I'm an immigrant to the UK, I remember vividly the pair of sneakers I wore when I was 8, and I went on that plane from China to Canada. I remember the sneakers I wore last year when I went from Canada to the UK, and I will remember that for life. Like, I still have both of those pairs of sneakers. So many stories are interwoven in that. I remember what I was wearing that day clearly, and the feeling, the rush of being in a new place, starting a new life. And this is a really, really great organization called the Shoe Project, where they document the shoes that immigrant women wear when they go to a new place.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What a cool story. Oh my gosh, the stories must be amazing.
Yeah, and I bring this up because when you view your clothing as stories, are you going to want to get rid of the jacket you wore when you went to a whole new life? Are you going to want to get rid of the shoes you wore when you graduated and took that exam and you ended up getting 98%? Are you going to want to just throw away that purse you found at the antique store with the one that your grandma gave you, right? No. Probably not, because you associate it with the story, the feeling, the emotion, the love. But because there's so much fast fashion, cheap fashion, available everywhere, micro trends, the clothing now is not about the story or the emotion. It's about what's trendy. It's about what's going to get you the most likes. And I think when we fall into the numbers of the quantity of clothing versus the quality, you start to see the clothes as just another number, just another commodity. Every article of clothing has a story. The garment workers whose hands touched it, who sewed on the buttons, the journey it had, right? This is why I think, legislation is a huge part of what we do at Threading Change, one of the four shins, because one of the parts of legislation in the European Union that's very interesting is something to do called a digital product passport, or DPP, where you can scan the QR code on the tag and it tells you the story and the journey of that garment. And I think if we were all to know the story or the journey of certain garments, we would treat the garments with more love and respect rather than just viewing it as another piece of clothing.
That would be amazing because it basically humanizes it. It takes it from this item that's just hanging on a rack to be like, it's almost like the ripples. Like, where did it come from? Where was the fabric produced? Who was it who sewed it for you? And it brings the human element back into it, right?
Definitely. Yeah.
So I'm curious, Sophia, I didn't put this in my questions to prepare you, but I'm going to throw it at you anyway and see what you think. So the people who listen to this podcast, a lot of them are home sewists, right? So they're people who they like either sew some of their own clothes or maybe all of their own clothes. What part do you think home sewists can play in supporting the games of threading change in terms of, I don't know, like, because I guess that what I'm thinking about for myself is I have to think about what fabric I'm sourcing, like where did the fabric come from? What is the fabric content? So there's sort of that perspective, who made that fabric? But then there's also like, I feel like for myself, my garments, like when I think about them and look at them, I think more about there's a story a bit behind it because I created it. So I might be like, oh God, that's the dress I made. I had to pull the thread out 3 times till I got it right. Yeah. I'm just curious, like, can you think of like, could home sewists have an interesting part to play in the discussion or the attitude change towards garments? Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. Well, first of all, I commend you for being a home sewist because, like, I genuinely, like, I'm not the best at sewing, but I'm, getting more and more into it. I find it very therapeutic. It's like how I feel when I'm like painting or going for a bike ride. And I feel like we have this term like lock in when you're like in flow state. When you're in flow state of doing a task, whether it be sewing or cooking or whatever, I think it also just makes you like in calm, like more calmer generally.
Yeah.
And I think what about our message that resonates with home sewists and where you can be involved is, if we're doing an event in your city, please come lead a mending workshop or a repair workshop. We would love to have you. One of my biggest joys is seeing people's face when they first would tell them about the community quilt and they're like, I don't know if I want to do this. I don't know how to sew. And we're like, that's okay. We'll teach you. And they're like, I don't know. Like, I never used a sewing machine. We're like, that's all good. We'll teach you. And they're kind of like, really? We're like, yeah. They're like, I might suck. It's okay. We have time. Like, this event is for 5 hours. And the number of people we've taught, whether they're as young as like 6 years old and their parents is kind of supervising them as well, or, older folks. I think the fact that they get to do something with their hands and tactile, it makes them realize all the sweat and labor goes into making clothing, but it makes them realize also how personable it is. So for any home sewers, we would love to have you come and help us with the quilt, teach people how to sew. They would love to learn from you as experts. That would be great. And I think something else I really admire about home sewers is that like you have a creative idea that you're kind of bringing to life by, having a vision on something. And I think we can all benefit from that because, again, when you're making the piece yourself, you're proud of it. That is not just a story. That's actually your creation. It goes from commodity to story to creation. And I wish that more people had these skills, right? Which is why we do these mending workshops and the community quilt at our events to help more people become advocates of sewing and mending and repair.
Cool. I like it. Yeah. There's something, so I'm this year I'm sort of just starting my own business and I'm starting to do more teaching, and there's something really magical about passing on those skills and seeing people create things themselves and how proud they are when they finish it. And I find it so inspiring. And like you said, it's also kind of good for your mental health. Like a lot of us, I think home sewists find it's like, it puts us in that flow state, calms us down, grounds us, I wish that all sewists globally could have that experience. I'm sure it's not that at all when you work in a garment factory.
No. Yeah.
But wouldn't it be amazing if we could all get some of that feeling back in our sewing, not just us home sewists? We're kind of privileged that we have the, time, money, skills to be able to create garments ourselves. Yeah. Any thoughts about home sewists and how we source our fabric? Because some people are really big advocates for like trying to thrift fabric, trying to go to your local thrift store, finding fabric, or sometimes buying garments that then get upcycled versus buying so-called virgin fabric versus buying like what might sound like a better fabric, like an organic cotton or an organic linen as opposed to conventional. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah. That's an interesting question because we talked earlier about how Kindor Textiles, right, is one that gave us a lot of the fabrics. And I know tons of people in the Lower Mainland, get fabrics from them, whether you're a store, business owner, or a home sewist. I think doing your research is very important because, as I said before, a lot of people and brands use a lot of marketing in fashion. Like, what even is recycled polyester? Is recycled polyester actually sustainable? Like, that's like a big topic right now. And it's interesting because 2 years ago, the UK came out with something called CMA, which is like the Green Claims Guidelines, where brands can actually be fined for saying misleading claims. There were some brands that were saying that their articles of clothing were recycled when it was only like 15% recycled content. Is that really recycled?
Like 1.5? Like 15%?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Is that actually recycled? It's very, very, very partially recycled, right? So I think getting past all of the BS and all the jargon and really doing your research and understanding, like, what is recycled polyester mean? What does recycled cotton mean? What is it actually made out of? What does organic mean? What does ethical fair trade mean? What is a global organic cotton certification standard? What is certified leather? Getting past all this, and there's good resources about this on our website, I can link it to you. Knowledge is power. The more you know how to differentiate between greenwashing and marketing and what's actually sustainable, the better choices you can make as a home sewist. Because also, like, home sewists are not massive, maybe they are, but they're not usually like multi-million-dollar brands, right? Like producing tons of garments. It's like a hobby. And you're using your hard-earned money to make these items. Make sure your money is going somewhere good. Support local level fabric stores, community-based stores. Keep the fabric in circulation. Examples of really good places to check out in Vancouver and around. I mean, everyone knows Supply in Victoria. There's Fab Scrap in Vancouver. Our Social Fabric in Vancouver is also really good. D-Brand is good in working with businesses. Kindor is great. I think supporting more of these small businesses and their fabric selections is miles better than going for like a sexy recycled polyester when it probably isn't even fully recycled.
So educating ourselves about what do these terms and labels and certifications and all that means before consuming the fabric, before buying the fabric.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Any last topics we didn't cover or last comments that you'd like to add before we wrap up today?
Well, I think, if I could leave you with anything, I think, we have to make so many choices every day. What you eat, what time you want to wake up, what you eat, and fashion is sometimes one of the first decisions or the first 5 you make in a day. Let's make it count. And I mean that by educating yourself, educating your community, doing your research, participating in community events, understanding the materiality of your clothing, and also using policy as a lever. Right now, EPR, which stands for Extended Producer Responsibility Policy, is being rolled out more and more around the globe, where governments are mandating that producers or companies that produce a product are also now responsible for the product. So what that means is if you buy a shirt from H&M, you can actually take that shirt later back to H&M, and they have a responsibility legally to recycle it. Not dispose it, recycle it. So the way that we consume and use fashion is changing. It's changing for the first time in this way in the last couple of centuries. Make sure you educate yourself. Make sure you know where you can take these different types of clothing items and ensure that we help more people be aware of these issues. Because when you choose better and when you do better, that's when the ripple effects come.
I want to say a huge thank you, Sophia, for taking time out of your obviously incredibly busy schedule to talk to us today. I had so much fun digging into threading change. I'm feeling so inspired by the work you guys do. I'm like, yay. I'm glad that even though I'm turning 51 this year, I can still be involved in these issues. I'm not excluded from threading changes activities. No. I'm benefiting from the education and everything that you guys are doing. And I'm totally blown away by the work you're doing and that you started. And I'm just, so huge congratulations and huge thank you so much for taking some time with us today.
Yeah, thank you, Kat. And you raise a good point. Like, our events are not, we will never, ever, ever be like, you can't come to this because you're not under 35. Like, that's not what we do at all. I think when we say youth led, it's more like our leadership team are all young people because we really care about this topic. Anyone of all ages, of any race, orientation, whatever, are always welcome. And because fashion is global, we need everybody on board. But yeah, thanks for having me. This was really great, really fun questions. And if you're a hobby sewist, home sewist, get in touch with us and we would love to have you at our event.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this episode and are left feeling inspired. For more info about the podcast, including show notes for this and every episode, head to checkyourthread.com. I'd love to hear from you, so if you have any comments, questions or ideas for future episodes, please get in touch by emailing zoe@checkyourthread.com or find me on Instagram @checkyourthread. Massive thanks to Patrick Potter for production support, to Sylvia Seller for the awesome logo design, and to Simon at Palm Skin Productions for the music. This ad-free podcast would not be possible without listener support, so if you feel you are able, please consider signing up to the Check Your Thread Patreon. For the equivalent of buying me a coffee each month, you'll be making it possible to continue producing regular episodes. Links can be found in the show notes and on the website checkyourthread.com. I hope you'll listen again next week. Until then, take care. Bye!